Hey everyone, welcome back to English Express, the podcast where two friends have completely real, natural conversations in English so you can listen, repeat, and start sounding more fluent. I'm Lexi.
And I'm Finn. Really glad to be here. This is actually one of my favorite topics we've done so far, so I've genuinely been looking forward to this conversation all week.
So today we are talking about relationships and friendships. Not in a therapy session kind of way, just the honest way that two people might actually talk about it over a coffee. And throughout this conversation, we're going to be using a lot of vocabulary that comes up naturally when English speakers talk about the people in their lives. Words around connection, trust, boundaries, and everything in between.
And as always, shadow us as you listen. First time through, just enjoy the conversation and let it wash over you without pressure. Second time, pick one of us, either Lexi or me, and repeat what we say right after we say it. Match the rhythm, the pace, the tone. Don't aim for perfect. Aim for natural. Your mouth needs to get used to the sounds, not just your brain.
Exactly. Okay, let's start with something I think a lot of people find surprisingly hard. Making friends as an adult. Because when you're a child, it seems completely effortless. You're in a playground, someone has the same lunchbox as you, and suddenly you're best friends. There's no effort involved, no strategy, no awkwardness. It just happens.
It becomes genuinely difficult as an adult, and nobody really prepares you for that shift. When you're in school or university, you're constantly surrounded by people your own age, sharing the same schedule, the same stress, the same environment. Friendships form almost automatically because proximity does the work for you. You see the same people every single day without even trying.
And then that structure disappears, and you have to be intentional about it in a way that feels slightly unnatural. You can't walk up to someone at work and say, "I think we have a lot in common. Would you like to be my friend?" The social rules around making friends as an adult don't really exist in the same clear way they did when we were younger. There's no script for it.
There's a kind of vulnerability in it that doesn't come up the same way in childhood friendships. As kids, you just play together, and that becomes friendship. But as an adult, putting yourself out there and expressing that you'd like to spend more time with someone is a small act of courage. And not everyone is comfortable with that kind of exposure. The fear of being turned down or rejected, even in a friendly context, is real, and it holds people back.
I think that vulnerability is actually what separates real friendships from acquaintances, because almost everyone has plenty of acquaintances. People you're on fine terms with, people you'd say hello to, people you'd have a perfectly pleasant conversation with at a party. But that's very different from a real bond, a genuine connection that actually means something and that you genuinely miss if it disappeared from your life.
An acquaintance is someone you know. A friend is someone who knows you. And that difference is significant. It takes time, it takes shared experience, and it takes both people being willing to show something real about themselves, not just the polished, everything is fine version that most of us present to the world by default.
So, what makes a good friend, in your view? If you had to define it, what are the qualities that matter most to you personally?
Trust, without question. That's the absolute foundation of everything. If you can't trust someone, if you're always slightly uncertain about whether they're being honest with you, whether they'll keep what you've shared with them private, whether they genuinely want what's best for you, then the friendship has no solid ground underneath it. You can have a lot of fun with someone and still not really trust them, and that's a very different thing from real friendship.
I'd put empathy on that list too. The ability to genuinely try to understand what another person is feeling, not just react to the surface of what they're saying. Some people are really good at this. They listen in a way that makes you feel truly heard, like what you're saying actually matters to them. And other people, even with the best intentions, are already preparing their response before you've even finished your sentence.
Oh, I know that type. I've had conversations where I'm explaining something that genuinely matters to me, and I can see the other person nodding along, but they're not really present. And when they respond, their answer tells me they absorbed the words, but not what I was actually trying to communicate.
That gap in empathy can feel really isolating. More isolating sometimes than having no one to talk to at all.
And I think reciprocity is the third quality I'd name. Friendship has to go both ways. If you're always the one reaching out, always the one making plans, always the one who remembers the details of what's going on in the other person's life, and they're not matching that effort at all, then that imbalance slowly wears you down over time. You start to feel invisible.
It creates a kind of quiet resentment that's very hard to address directly, because it doesn't feel like a fight. It just feels like a slow drift, a gradual pulling away from each other because the energy and care isn't being returned. And eventually you stop reaching out, and they don't reach out either, and the friendship just quietly dissolves.
That phrase, drift apart, is such a natural way to describe how friendships can end without any particular event or argument. Just a gradual distance that grows until you realize you haven't spoken in 6 months, and somehow it doesn't feel strange anymore. It just feels like the way things have settled between you.
Sometimes that's okay. Not every friendship is meant to be permanent. Some friendships are very specific to a particular period of your life. The people you were close to at university, the colleagues you bonded with at a specific job. And when that shared context changes, the friendship naturally fades. That isn't a failure. That's just life moving forward and taking you in different directions.
I've had friendships like that, and I think the healthy way to see them is to feel genuinely grateful for what they were, rather than sad about what they're not anymore. They were real when they were happening. They mattered at the time. They just ran their natural course.
Where it gets harder is when a friendship fades and one person feels very differently about it than the other. One person assumes the friendship is still very much alive, and the other has mentally already moved on without making that clear. That mismatch can be genuinely painful for the person left behind, wondering what happened.
Or when a friendship ends because of something specific that happened, a betrayal of trust, a moment where someone didn't show up when it really mattered, something said that couldn't be taken back. Those endings are much harder to process because they carry real hurt alongside the grief of the loss.
Have you ever had to end a friendship deliberately? Consciously decided that someone was no longer good for you and pulled back from them?
Once, yeah. And it was genuinely hard because the person wasn't a bad person. They were just someone whose company consistently left me feeling depleted. Every interaction left me feeling worse, not better. And I started to notice that I felt relieved when plans with them got canceled rather than disappointed. That felt like a signal I couldn't keep ignoring.
That relief signal is really significant. Your emotional response to the prospect of spending time with someone tells you a lot about how that relationship is actually affecting your life. Not excitement, not even neutral, but consistent relief when you don't have to show up. That means something.
People sometimes use the word toxic to describe relationships like that, and I think it's a useful word, even though it gets overused. A toxic dynamic isn't necessarily about someone being deliberately cruel. It's about a relationship that consistently brings out a worse version of you, drains your energy without replenishing it, or makes you feel small or misunderstood on a regular basis.
Or makes you feel like you have to perform a version of yourself, rather than just being who you actually are. That's one of the things I value most in close friendships, the freedom to be completely authentic, to not filter yourself, to say what you actually think, to show up as the full, complicated version of yourself and trust that it'll be received with understanding rather than judgment.
Authenticity is interesting because it requires both people to create the right conditions for it. You can be the most open person in the world, but if the other person judges everything you say or makes you feel silly for having the feelings you have, you'll start self-censoring. The openness closes off. You start presenting the safe, edited version of yourself instead of the real one.
Boundaries are closely related to this. And I know it's a word that gets used constantly right now, but it refers to something genuinely important. Knowing what you're comfortable with in a relationship, what you need from it, and being able to say that without feeling like you're being demanding or difficult. It's about being honest with yourself and with the other person about your actual needs.
And having a friend who respects those limits once you've communicated them, because someone who consistently pushes past what you've said you're not comfortable with, even in small, seemingly minor ways, is communicating something about how much they value your comfort and well-being. Respecting someone's stated boundaries is a fundamental form of care.
The interesting thing about setting boundaries is that it often clarifies a relationship very quickly. When you're honest about what you need, the people who genuinely care about you adjust without making it dramatic. And the people who don't, or who push back or make you feel guilty for having needs, that response is telling you something important about whether this person is actually safe to be close to.
Let's talk about something that's changed quite a lot about how friendships work in the last decade: online connection. Because now people form genuine friendships with people they've never met in person. Communities built around shared interests where real bonds develop between people who may be in completely different countries.
And those connections can be genuinely real. What creates a bond isn't physical closeness. It's shared experience, mutual understanding, the sense that someone sees and appreciates who you actually are. Those things can happen online just as authentically as they can happen sitting across a table from each other in person. The medium is different, but the connection can be equally real.
But there are real limits to what can be communicated digitally. You lose body language, tone of voice, the shared silence that can mean more than words when you're with someone in person. And text is notoriously easy to misread. Something written without any negative intention can land in a way the writer never intended. And then you're in a misunderstanding that's harder to resolve because you're still using text to try to resolve it.
Digital communication can also give people a false sense that they're staying in touch when they're actually not connecting in any meaningful way. You see someone post something, you leave a comment or a like, you both feel like some kind of contact has been made, but you haven't actually spoken. You don't know what's really happening in their life. You know the version of it they chose to put online.
That surface engagement can actually make you less likely to reach out properly because it creates the feeling of connection without the real substance of it. You feel like you know what's going on with someone because you follow them online, but you haven't genuinely checked in on them in months.
Let's also talk about the difference between being alone and feeling lonely, because I think people use them as if they mean the same thing, but they're actually very different experiences.
Completely different. Being alone is a physical state. There's no one else around. Feeling lonely is an emotional state, a sense of disconnection and being unseen that has nothing to do with how many people are physically near you. Some of the most isolated I've felt has been in crowds, and some of my most peaceful, settled moments have been completely by myself.
I actually need a lot of alone time to feel balanced. I think that's true for a lot of people who are more introverted. It's not that they don't value connection deeply. They might value it more than anyone, but they recharge in solitude rather than in company. Being around people, even people they love, is energizing up to a point, and then it starts to become draining.
And that's genuinely hard to explain to someone who doesn't experience it that way. I have friends who are very extroverted. Being around people gives them energy. Being alone for too long makes them feel flat and restless. And to them, choosing to spend a Friday evening quietly at home when you could be out seems strange. But for someone who needs that solitude, that quiet Friday evening is exactly what they were looking forward to all week.
Understanding where you sit on that spectrum and where the people close to you sit makes friendships and relationships significantly smoother. Not taking it personally when a friend needs to cancel plans because they're feeling overstimulated. Not feeling guilty yourself for needing more space than the people around you seem to need. It's just different ways of being human.
What does a really healthy friendship feel like to you when you have one? What are the actual signs that tell you, this is a good one? This person is good for me.
You feel better after spending time with them than you did before. That sounds simple, but it's actually quite a precise test. Not just neutral, genuinely better. More yourself, more settled, sometimes more energized, sometimes more at ease, depending on what you needed from that particular interaction that day.
And you can tell them the truth, not just the convenient, positive version of what's happening in your life, but what's actually going on, including the parts that don't reflect particularly well on you. The mistakes you made, the times you fell short of your own expectations, the things you're genuinely worried about. And they receive it without immediately judging you or rushing to fix everything.
And you think of them when something good happens, not just when something goes wrong. I think we tend to reach out to close friends when we're struggling, which is right and important. But the friendships that really sustain you over time are the ones where you also want to call them when something wonderful happens, where they're one of the first people you think of when you have good news to share.
Let's talk about romantic relationships now, because so much of what we've said, trust, empathy, reciprocity, boundaries, applies there too, but with higher stakes involved.
What do you think is the single most important thing in a romantic relationship? If you had to pick one quality that determines whether it actually works over a long period of time?
Communication. Not because the other things don't matter, they absolutely do, but because so many relationship problems are really communication problems underneath everything else. Resentment that builds slowly because one person never clearly said what they needed. Distance that grows because neither person spoke honestly about what was happening between them. Conflicts that escalate because both people were defending their own position rather than genuinely trying to understand the other.
Compatibility is the one I'd choose. And I don't mean just shared interests or similar personalities. I mean deep compatibility around how two people handle difficulty together, how they make decisions under pressure, what they fundamentally believe about what a good life looks like. Two people can love each other genuinely and still not be deeply compatible in those ways. And realizing that later rather than earlier is one of the most painful experiences in adult life.
And conflict is actually where you see the truest picture of a relationship. Anyone can be warm and easy to be with when everything is going smoothly. But how two people handle genuine disagreement, whether they go completely silent, whether things escalate quickly, whether they can actually hear the other person even when they strongly disagree, that tells you everything about whether the relationship has real durability.
I've been in situations where the person I was with and I had completely different approaches to conflict. I tend to want to address things directly, talk through what happened, understand each other's perspective, move forward. And they needed significant time and space alone to process before they could talk at all. Neither approach was inherently wrong, but we didn't understand each other's patterns, so every disagreement left both of us feeling like we'd handled it badly.
Right. That's an incredibly common incompatibility that people don't think to actually discuss until they're already in the middle of something difficult. Knowing how you and your partner each handle stress and disagreement and being genuinely honest about it early sounds clinical, but saves a great deal of pain down the line.
Long-distance relationships are a particularly intense test of all of this, because suddenly communication is essentially all you have. You can't resolve a misunderstanding by sitting together and seeing each other's face and body language. Everything has to happen through calls and messages, and so much of what carries real meaning in person is completely absent when you're only communicating digitally.
And yet, the people who make long-distance work often say that it forces a kind of intentionality and depth that in-person relationships can miss. You have to actually properly talk about real things because there's nothing else available to fill the space between you. You can't just sit comfortable in the same room and assume that's enough.
Let me ask you about red flags, because this is something people talk about a lot, but I'm not sure everyone is equally good at actually spotting them in real situations when they're involved emotionally.
That's true. In theory, it sounds simple. Just notice the warning signs. But when you care about someone, or you want things to work, or you've already invested time and emotion in a relationship, it becomes very easy to explain away things that you would immediately identify as a problem if a friend described them to you. We're far better at seeing other people's situations clearly than our own.
Some things I'd look out for: someone who consistently dismisses your feelings, someone who makes you feel like your needs are unreasonable or too much, Someone whose words and actions don't match over time. Someone who behaves very differently depending on who's watching. Warm and charming in public, cold or dismissive in private.
And someone who doesn't have meaningful long-term friendships. Because the way someone maintains their friendships over time tells you a great deal about how they'll treat you when the initial excitement fades. People who are genuinely good at relationships tend to be good at all their relationships, not just the romantic ones. Their social circle tends to reflect who they really are.
Let's finish with something practical. If someone listening to this wants to actively build new friendships as an adult, really do the work of finding their people, what's your honest advice?
Show up to things consistently. Not once, consistently over time. Whether that's an interest group, a weekly class, a community event. The first time, you're a stranger. The second time, you're a familiar face. By the fifth or sixth time, conversations form naturally, and the bond begins to build. You can't rush it, but you absolutely can create the right conditions for it to happen.
Repetition is the actual mechanism of friendship. Research suggests it takes a surprisingly high number of shared hours before an acquaintance becomes a genuine friend. And those hours don't accumulate in one or two big events. They build slowly across many small, ordinary interactions. So you have to put yourself in situations where those ordinary moments can happen again and again.
And be willing to be the person who initiates, which is the uncomfortable part. Suggesting to someone you've met a few times that you'd like to meet up one-on-one can feel more exposing than it rationally needs to be. But most people are genuinely pleased when someone takes that initiative. They were often hoping someone would make the first move too. They just didn't want to be the one to do it themselves.
Except that not every potential friendship will develop into something meaningful. And that's nobody's fault. You're not going to become close with every interesting person you meet, and that's fine. Being okay with that takes a lot of the pressure off each individual interaction and makes the whole process feel much less high stakes and frightening.
And be patient. Real friendships take time. Sometimes a lot of time. Some of the deepest friendships I have started quite slowly. The connection built gradually across many small meetings, until one day I realized this person had become someone I genuinely couldn't imagine not having in my life. That's worth waiting for and being patient about.
Which is ultimately what all of this is about. Finding the people who make your life feel fuller, more honest, more supported, and then doing the consistent work of keeping those people close. Okay, vocabulary time. Let's go through every key word from today's episode slowly. Listen, then repeat out loud right after us.
Bond. A bond is a deep emotional connection built through shared experience and time. We formed a really strong bond during those months we worked on the project together.
Acquaintance. An acquaintance is someone you know but are not close to. He's not a close friend, more of an acquaintance I see occasionally.
Vulnerability. Vulnerability means being open and honest about your real feelings, even when it feels risky. Real friendship requires a certain amount of vulnerability from both people.
Reciprocal. Something reciprocal goes both ways. Both people give and receive equally. A healthy friendship is reciprocal. Both people make the effort.
Drift apart. When people drift apart, they gradually lose closeness without any specific event causing it. We were very close at university, but slowly drifted apart after graduation.
Authentic. Authentic means genuine and true to yourself. I want friendships where I can be completely authentic without filtering myself.
Toxic. A toxic relationship is one that consistently harms your well-being. It took me a long time to recognize that the dynamic had become toxic.
Empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share what another person is feeling. She has a remarkable capacity for empathy. She always seems to know how you're really feeling.
Boundaries. Boundaries are the limits you communicate in a relationship about what you are and are not comfortable with. Setting clear boundaries early saves a lot of confusion and hurt later.
Compatible. Compatible means able to exist together well because your values and ways of being align. We got on well, but we weren't compatible in the deeper ways that matter.
Red flags. Red flags are warning signs that something may not be right in a relationship. Looking back honestly, there were red flags early on that I chose to ignore.
Trust. Trust is the belief that someone is honest, reliable, and genuinely has your best interests at heart. Trust is the foundation that every real relationship is built on.
Conflict. Conflict is a serious disagreement between people. How two people handle conflict tells you almost everything about the health of a relationship.
Long distance. A long-distance relationship or friendship is one where two people live far apart. Maintaining a long-distance friendship takes real intention and consistent effort from both sides.
Platonic. Platonic describes a relationship that is close and caring, but has no romantic element. They have been close friends for over 15 years. It is entirely platonic.
Social circle. Your social circle is the group of friends and acquaintances you spend time with regularly. Moving to a new city meant building an entirely new social circle from scratch.
Attachment. Attachment refers to the emotional bonds we form with others and the patterns around closeness that develop over time. Understanding your attachment style can explain a lot about how you behave in relationships.
Commitment. Commitment is the ongoing decision to invest in a relationship over time, especially when it requires real effort. Long-term friendship takes genuine commitment. It does not maintain itself.
Common ground. Common ground is the shared interests, values, or experiences that two people discover they have. Finding common ground is often what turns a stranger into someone you actually want to know.
Maintain. To maintain a relationship means to actively keep it alive and healthy through consistent care and attention over time. Good friendships do not survive on their own. You have to maintain them.
20 vocabulary words from today's episode. Go back and listen to the full conversation. Notice how every single one of those words appeared naturally, in real context, the way people actually use them. That is how real vocabulary learning works, not from memorizing definitions in isolation, but from hearing language used the way it actually lives.
Thank you so much for being here with us today. If this episode was useful to you, share it with a friend who is also learning English. We will be back soon with a brand new conversation and more language to add to your English. Until then, keep shadowing, keep listening, and keep showing up for the people who matter.
See you next time.